What it do? Welcome into the Three Dudes Fantasy Football Show, and thank you for joining us for another episode. It is time for some fantasy spin. We take the NFL news and notes, quotes from the players and coaches, and put a fantasy spin on them. JJ Buck, Aaron Hernandez, Steven Masterson, what it do? And we're jumping right into it off the top. Quick takes on the big quarterback news with Tua Tagovailoa and Jordan Love getting their contract extensions. Let's start down in South Beach in Miami. So Tua becomes the richest Dolphin in history. It ends up being a 4-year extension, $93 million fully guaranteed. And the way they structured it, it could end up being just a 3-year, $150 million contract with just about $3 million in guaranteed money in 2027 if things don't work out. But still, it's about 5 years, $47 million per year overall. We'll go to our Dolphins insider, the man himself, Steven Masterson. First, are you surprised how much Tua got? And then not just for this season, but the next couple years, what does this mean for the Dolphins and Mike McDaniel?
Well, I mean, Tua said it at a press conference. The market is the market, right? Like you're gonna pay your quarterback 50 plus million. That's just it is what it is. And he's proven stat wise he should be paid well. Um, as for the next couple of years, like this year, they'll be great because their team's not changing. Really comes down to next year. Tyreek Hill's cap number is 56 million, so they're gonna have to extend or restructure. So I don't know what that looks like. Him and Waddle will be together for a while because I think they're both signed through 2028. So I don't know what it means for Tyreek Hill, but I think overall it's probably the right move. Like Tua is a good quarterback and he should get paid as if he's a good quarterback.
Yeah,
I
now
agree.
it's for Tua, it's all right, you're getting paid. Now you got to go win that division, win some games on the road, and see if you win a playoff game. That's what they're
Yep.
paying you to do, and that's what we're going to find out for the Dolphins. But Tua, he's sitting there right now. He was QB 11 last year, just under 16 points per game. He's going in the 12th round, so he's just outside the top 10. And I think that's probably where his value is going to sit. If you're a guy that's waiting on quarterback, Tua is probably high on your list. And then a quarterback that we've talked about a lot that we love is Jordan Love, and we're seeing him start to creep up the draft board as well. He got a 5-year extension, roughly $230 million, $100 million guaranteed. And Jordan Love on fire second half of the season. We've discussed the stats so much. He finished QB5 overall, about 18.7 points per game. Right now, he's in the 8th round, and I think maybe he could even tick up to being one of those guys that starts to go in the 7th round over the next month. But we look at Jordan Love. No surprise he got the extension. And what do you think that does, Aaron, in terms of the reaction from people? Do you think it actually maybe pushes him a little bit higher when people just see the news of Love got paid, he's locked in as a franchise, and just the hype continues?
Yeah, I definitely think the hype's going to continue. It's like they bought in making him, the highest paid quarterback ever. So it's like it's definitely, it loves love is going to keep going up. So I'm definitely that's how I see it. So he's going to tick up on draft boards personally, but still got a little bit to prove. We'll see how the season goes.
He does. I still like where you're getting Jordan Love if you're waiting, and you can get him in that 8th or 9th round, but he might be pushed up over the next couple weeks because people start reading the news, buying the hype, and he is a guy that backed it up last season. And mentioned the fantasy spin. We have different topics to get into today, from second round running backs to the late round running backs, a team that might provide a lot of opportunity when it comes to fantasy football this season, and some of the back end tight ends and who should you bet on with all this. And then stay tuned, because at the end, Steve's going to drop some blind resumes on us, and we're going to get your reaction to the rankings, the points per game, and does it match up with what you think about those players. But let's get it going. And I want to start in the second round, because I think we've seen an interesting shift. You know, waves of fantasy football. The zero running back was really a hot topic for a while this offseason. And with the free agency class, with Saquon Barkley going to Philadelphia, Derrick Henry going to Baltimore, I think people got more interested in going back in to the second round running back. And that's where I want to start is Who is your favorite second round running back? And right now, when you look at the running backs that are going in the second round, it's Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, and Kyron Williams have really bolted up draft boards just since the last time we talked about going over our mock draft. I think I was able to get him in the 4th round, and that ship has definitely sailed right now with Kyron Williams coming back in. But just of those list of names, I'm sorry with you, Steve, who's your favorite second round back right now?
So it's two backs that I really, really enjoy, and it's not going to be the one that we've talked about what feels like all off season. It's actually Saquon Barkley and Kyron Williams. So we've talked about it before. Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles. The Eagles have told us they want to run. Saquon Barkley is going to run. And when when he plays the Giants, he's going to have massive games. So, those are always great weeks too.
Revenge.
Revenge games. Kyron Williams, on the other hand, getting him in the 4th was awesome, right? But I think Kyron Williams is actually going where he should go at this point. You just need to handcuff him. Sean McVay's offense. There's offenses we know are going to run the ball, right? We know the Dolphins, we know the 49ers, we know the Packers, and we know the Rams. They're going to run the ball, and they're going to have a bell cow. I want shares of Kyron Williams. Like, I just think that's a player I really do like a lot this year. And then obviously Saquon.
Yeah, and you look at Kyron Williams, and he said before the start of training camp, he was excited to be able to pick up where he left off last year. He said, quote, being able to create more explosives in the run game and also being able to create more explosive in the pass game is a focus of his. And if you hear that in a PPR league, it makes you feel a lot better about investing in Kyron Williams in the second round. And you mentioned the Rams, and I had a good nugget from Pro Football Focus, and it was over the Rams have 31 games over the last 3 seasons with either a feature back or a back with everything except third down, which ranks 6th amongst teams. So that just reinforces kind of the stuff we're talking about, Sean McVay leaning into a true RB1 in their offense. And I know, Aaron, for you've talked a lot about Derrick Henry, and he's turning 30. And sometimes that's the number that we shy away from. But Henry feels like he's built different. He said ahead of training camp, quote, that's always going to be said when running backs get up in age, the stigma on the position. But I just focus on being healthy, doing my job, and I'm here. And then I'll let my play speak for my age. And how about this? The Ravens haven't had a running back with more than 300 carries since 2010. That's 14 years. And that was Ray Rice.
Flown.
At 307 carries. Now, Adrian Peterson, Frank Gore, and Raheem Mostert are the only running backs in the past decade who have a 1,000-yard season at 30 and older. So the age has proven to be something where it does hold these guys back. But are you buying that Derrick Henry can be on that list with AP, Frank Gore, and Raheem Mostert?
Yeah, I think so. I was like, the running backs that we talked about, I think Henry's probably been the most consistent. He's kind of, you can make that comparison with Adrian Peterson, and AP did, have his injuries, but he did come back and still, looked like a good running back for the time that he was there. So I definitely like Derrick Henry still in redraft. The other running back that and Steve talked about is probably Saquon. I like Saquon, and maybe Gibbs is an interesting one. I'm not sure on Jonathan Taylor. Kind of reading into that Colts offense. I'm not confident yet on how it's going to turn out. So Derrick Henry, for me, still audibly, so he's my go-to. PPR probably would be Saquon, and then of course, Steve talked about Kyron. Kyron is going to be solid, but I want to see where Gibbs goes, and Jonathan Taylor is kind of the two that I kind of feel a little indifferent on. So
it's been interesting seeing kind of the Jonathan Taylor love rise back up, because look at the Fantasy Pros ADP, the consensus rankings in PPR drafts, and Jonathan Taylor rose up to number 12 this past week. So right there at the turn of the first to second round. And what's going to be interesting is does Anthony Richardson vulture touchdowns from Jonathan Taylor? I think Jonathan Taylor can have a successful season with a running quarterback, just like Derrick Henry with Lamar Jackson. But I think the red zone is going to be fascinating because last year when Anthony Richardson was on the field, it was a short sample size, but he had a 43% design rush rate in the red zone. But some of that was, of course, we didn't see it with Jonathan Taylor. So that's going to be the interesting thing, is seeing these two guys together. It was just an offense that almost like Josh Allen and James Cook, right? You get into the red zone and does a quarterback take away some of the touchdowns? And does that really affect how you value these guys when you're taking them in the second round? So that might be something that, to me, pushes Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, and even Jahmyr Gibbs maybe ahead of Taylor and Henry, just based on the red zone rushing from the quarterbacks. How do you guys feel about that dynamic?
Well, the fact that they even said the Colts came out and said they weren't going to hold Richardson back, which is so,
which is surprising considering their track record with quarterbacks not wanting to get hurt so much. So, and Richardson's been injury prone throughout his football career. So it is.
I think there's reason to have concern, but I think when you look at it, like Jonathan Taylor probably should be a first round pick if he didn't have Anthony Richardson. So you're kind of seeing his talent is first round talent, but Anthony Richardson is moving to a second round. Like, I think we're just seeing it baked in. We all might say it's late second round is where he should pick, and obviously that's not where he's going. But I also don't think you're far off.
What's interesting is, as I mentioned, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. So Jackson was at a 23% red zone rushing share last year, but we also saw Gus Edwards hit double-digit touchdowns. So that's a good point, but I think that's something that Derrick Henry could accomplish, as only 10 players last year had 10 or more touchdowns. And Gus Edwards in this Ravens offense was one of those. So that wouldn't scare me away from Derrick Henry. Jalen Hurts was 38% in the red zone. And we know the tush push was some of that, especially when they get inside the 5 and to the goal line. So without Jason Kelce, does that number come back down? Does that benefit Saquon Barkley? And then Josh Allen was at 21%. The one thing I will say is sometimes, and I'm guilty of it like I just did, we can overstat these things. Believe in Derrick Henry. Believe in Saquon Barkley. They're going to have plenty of opportunities to score. And if Anthony Richardson does pick up where he left off, it's same thing for Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, if we look at all the players we just mentioned, the reason they're going the second round is there's a little thing, right? Kyron Williams, we say he's a little injury prone. Derrick Henry is he's old.
He's old.
Jonathan, he's old.
I wish I was
he's
30.
Younger than us, but yeah. Jonathan Taylor has a running quarterback. Jahmyr Gibbs is sharing the workload. We believe in all the talent that we are talking about. We're just saying this is why you're a second round pick. We believe these other guys in the first round don't have the same downside or the potential to have off weeks. But I think that's what we're seeing with the running backs in round 2. They all have a but behind them.
And I think that what intrigues me, and I've been someone that really the first 3 rounds, I've been really focusing on wide receivers, and a lot of the work I've been doing in the mock drafts, the floors are so enticing. Like, I look at all those guys in the second round, and I feel like we could be looking at easy, like a 15 point per game floor.
Yeah.
Every single week with those, 2 touchdown weeks, and all of a sudden you're sitting there at 30 points.
Yeah. No, it's that's why they're second round picks, right? Because you could have 30 points, but I think your floor is 15. Like, that's huge. I mean, 7 years ago, all those guys would have been first round players, and
I know, right?
And now look at it. It is really like the strategy that I was holding on to is going to be really tested if I'm able to get, what I think is an elite level wide receiver 1 in the first round, and then you're coming back with those options in the second round.
Yeah,
it's going to be really fun. But this could be a game changer in the third round. Devon Achane, is he a PPR game changer? And we know the flash in the pan that he was last season. And Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, the backfield for the Dolphins. They're locked in. It's Tua, it's Tyreek Hill, it's Jalen Waddle, it's this running back combination. But there's some interesting stuff being done in the offseason. And for Devon Achane, he said that the Dolphins lined him up at wide receiver. He was working on running some routes. And that happened during the mandatory minicamp. Now we're in training camp. Tua's going to be back out there practicing again. So they're going to lean into this. And of the 300 snaps Achane took as a rookie, 100 did come in the slot or outside of the backfield. And only Cordell Patterson lined up outside the backfield on a greater percentage of snaps. And if you're looking at waiting on a running back and all of a sudden Achane is sitting there in the third round, is this a game changer for PPR if he's on the field? And then is this going to allow him to hit that value? Because Mostert's going to come back down. He's not scoring 18 touchdowns, but I also don't think they're going to forget about him in short yardage situations. So could Achane be the kind of difference maker in PPR? What do you think, Steve?
So I've changed my tune as the season's progressed on. I believe all off season we talked about this. I was a Raheem Mostert, like draft him. He's the better value. And as more and more of this info has come out, and just kind of looking at his explosion rates from last year, Achane's explosion rate was the highest we've seen out of the amount of touches he had. So purely based on that, I see why he's being drafted in the third round. I still not sure if that's where I want to draft him, but he still falls into the exact the reason I'm struggling with him is I want a piece of a high-powered offense that likes to run. That's what Miami is. And he's clearly the most explosive. So I think I have come 100% around, and I will draft Devon Achane in the third round, but I will then really heavily target Raheem Mostert just to make sure that I have both of them on my team. But I do want a part of this Dolphin rushing attack because just like we said with Kyren Williams, the Dolphins run, the Rams run, the 49ers run, and those running backs should be going in the first two rounds. And the only reason Achane's not is because we're not sure where Raheem Mostert is the guy or isn't. But if we knew Raheem Mostert wasn't there, Achane would be a first or second round pick. So I think I'm okay with that in the third round, taking a flyer on him and going, I'll just make sure I get Raheem Mostert and I will have a powerful run game.
And we're talking about dude who was RB24 last year and would have been much higher had he been able to be on the field more than he was in that offense. And there are lots more opportunities for Raheem Mostert, who finished as RB5. And I think we're going to see those two players probably finish closer together. But I think I'm with you with what you said. Is I'm very intrigued. The explosiveness, he's fast. They're going to get him in the football. When he continues to get those opportunities, essentially being not only an RB2 with RB1 upside, but in terms of just the pecking order of that offense, but and a wide receiver 3 and getting some opportunities to get the football extra. Now, when you look at the third round running backs, Aaron, Achane, Isaiah Pacheco in Kansas City, Travis Etienne in Jacksonville, I like Achane above those other guys. But how do you feel, especially about Etienne? Do you think he can keep up the pace in the red zone for that offense?
Yeah, that one's an interesting read. I'm not gonna lie, I like Pacheco over Etienne in red zone for stuff like that. I'm curious on how Jacksonville's offense is gonna turn out because what we're seeing in training camp isn't necessarily good news, but it's from the passing offense. But right now, it's like Jacksonville's defense is the one making the noise in training camp over the offense. So I still have that concern on Jacksonville's offense. They have a lot of firepower, but it's got to come together. And Etienne may take a little step back, in my opinion. Still, I don't think he's going to be up to the numbers of last year, but that's my personal opinion.
Last year was fantastic.
It's amazing.
He still has a solid floor in the third round. 11 touchdowns, so he was one of the 10 players that had double-digit rushing touchdowns last season. Did a little more than you'd expect in the passing game. You had 58 catches, 476 yards, just 1 touchdown. So maybe that's something that kind of balances itself out if he regresses a little bit in the rushing touchdowns as he kind of keeps some of that momentum in the passing game. And then you look at Pacheco, 7 rushing touchdowns on the ground. And that's an offense that has actually really excelled in short yardage situations. Like Patrick Mahomes is actually, if you look at some of the numbers, and I got it, and we can dive into it later talking about quarterbacks, but he actually like leads the league in touchdown passes of 10 yards or less. So just those, you think of Travis Kelce, you think of those tight situations, but Isaiah Pacheco moving the ball. So I do think these 3 guys are interesting options, especially if you go wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. But to me, if it falls where you can pick with these 3 guys on the board, I want the explosiveness. You know, I do want Achane over those guys. And knowing that they used him in the passing game that many snaps last year, you expect him to be more consistent in year 2. And is this someone, though, Steve, which is interesting? Now, we're not talking about first round pick like, you know, Bijan Robinson or even Jahmyr Gibbs sorting with that. A second round guy that you like in the 3rd round.
Wait, I asked.
Because I know you've talked about the kind of the sophomore slump, you know,
yeah,
of not necessarily it's going to be bad,
right.
but overpaying, trying to match the value, even at the top end of a draft.
Well, we're kind of seeing so overvalued right now. Breece Hall, or not Breece Hall. My apologies. Bijan Robinson is going in the 1st round, and that's purely based off of what we presume talent, which we know he has it. Jahmyr Gibbs, kind of similar. Achane, again, that's why at the beginning of the season, I was kind of down on him, was because he's a rookie and I'm not a big sophomore guy. But I'm willing to back him up. And that's why I think I'm more willing to take him, is because Raheem Mostert's value is 10th round. Right. But if I had a draft between him and Raheem Mostert, and Raheem Mostert was in the 5th, I probably don't take Achane. And I'm most likely going to take Travis Etienne. I think that's how I have it ranked right now, is Achane then Etienne. I mean, Etienne finishes RB2. Like, we're just afraid that their offense is not great, but he's still, I don't know. Etienne is one of those ones to me where I don't know if we're drafting him appropriately. Like, the players going ahead of him, I don't know if it's
the small market.
Yeah, it just, if you finish as running back 2 and nothing else has changed on your team, why are we drafting you as running back 9 or 11? You know,
late.
He's somewhere in there. Why did he fall so far? And I can't. There's a potential that I could even talk myself into this now, where Etienne moves up on my board into, you know, early round 3, late round 2. And so I get where, like, we want the explosiveness.
Well, do you think it's
Achane, but
the fact that the value at the running back position right now actually matches up with the hierarchy? Like, yeah, there's name brands, but you see the path to Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, like, living up to those expectations. And it's not necessarily like we're overlooking Etienne. It's just actually maybe the top of the running backs is actually living up to the way we used to draft running backs.
Okay, maybe. I mean, you can make the argument that Breece Hall and Christian McCaffrey, you can see clear paths, and Bijan Robinson, the same thing. But we literally just went through on all those running backs in the 2nd round, where there's an if or a but. And I can't say that same thing with Travis. I can't say if or but with Travis Etienne. I can't say Tank Bigsby is going to dig into his workload.
No.
And so that's where I'm like, why is now that we're really talking about, I don't know if Travis Etienne is being valued properly. I don't know if he's running back 3, but he doesn't have the same. Christian McCaffrey and Breece Hall have clear paths. I can't say the same for everybody else. So I as we've talked about this, I actually think now I'm going to change it, and Etienne's going to move up on my board, because I can't think of a reason why he's not.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how Etienne's season went. I think most of his points were kind of in the first half.
Yeah, so he wasn't as strong in the second half.
Second half was a little rough.
I think he had like a 4 touchdown game.
He did.
one of them, and so he had spike weeks. And so maybe that's the thing with Etienne that could be being baked into these rankings is the floor is
That's
which
fair.
is the consistency you're getting. Like Etienne helped me win games early in the fantasy football season.
I
Mhm.
remember
And
that.
he was a player that I actually used in trades to acquire, go out and get a bigger wide receiver. But that could be why Etienne is where he's at. But still, as you mentioned, Steve, this is a guy that we're looking at. There's talk about Bigsby becoming a thing, but we know Etienne's a thing. Like
Well, and he
that's
played. He did. You're right. He had some big weeks and some small weeks, but he also played all the games.
Yeah.
You know,
availability.
so he played in every game. Christian McCaffrey missed a game. Brees Hall made all of his games. Raheem Mostert missed 2. But if we look at just the players playing ahead of him, right? Kyron Williams missed 5 games last season. Bijan played in every game. So again,
But-
you can make that argument. But Jahmyr Gibbs missed 2. Saquon Barkley missed 3. So I'm willing to listen to it, and I don't know how high he's going to move up. I don't think he moves ahead of Kyron for me, but I just don't know if he's being valued properly, and maybe we are overvaluing Achane and those players a little bit too much.
It's
'Cause
definitely
they
an
miss players
argument,
whose
though.
time played too. I don't know. I kind of walked into we were
I
talking
mean-
about, so I started looking at his stats going, wait, why is he
It-
so far down?
If Achane's on the field, he's money. And the Dolphins backfield, and it might be a terrible comparison, but it kind of feels like going back to CJ Spiller, Fred Jackson. It's like one's really consistent, he's older, but CJ was money when he was on the field.
Mhm.
And Achane definitely looks like that and even better. And that's where the hype is. It's like if that guy's on the field, it's like he is a monster and he's gonna get his, but it's like
Well, I mean, you're not
hopefully he
wrong.
stays on the field.
He played in 11 games and had almost 200 points in fantasy.
It was
Right,
insane.
like, so I mean, that 70-point game against the Broncos, I think he scored 50 in that one game. So he has those huge boom weeks potential, and so I get why we're thinking about him that way, and we think he'll move in. I just wanted to make the argument for Travis Etienne because we all kind of just said,
Steve believes.
he's a 3rd-round pick, and I'm like, well, but should he be? So
Yeah, the best ability is availability.
Yeah.
And I know we're
That's
looking
true.
for that elite game-changing fantasy upside when we are drafting at the top of the draft, but also having a guy that's consistent with obviously top 5 ability. I think Etienne is interesting, and that is something that we can throw in that debate, 2nd round, 3rd round. But I do like. I think all 3 of those guys are good options. I think Pacheco is kind of in that mold of Travis Etienne. Like he's consistent, plays a lot, a part of a good offense in Kansas City. So if you go maybe wide receiver early, getting one of those guys, you still feel good about RB1. But what I
if
think,
I took all 3 of them, I'd be happy. As my running back 1.
I mean, I will say this. I would be more comfortable taking Etienne over Bijan, in my opinion. Bijan is, the man, but also it's like the bad man's gone and now Bijan's back to being hyped. So it's like really, it'd be interesting.
It's return on investment there, though, right? You think Bijan's
Exactly.
a better running back, but you can get him, and Bijan's a 1st and Etienne's 3rd.
Yep.
and
Got it.
that's a lot of the discussions we've had, and kind of what we're trying to bring to the table is the value of how you build your team and why, as opposed to maybe just looking at positional rankings, when you look at the consensus of where players are getting drafted, that gives you a really good idea of how you're going to build your team throughout the draft. And with that, you go from the 2nd, 3rd round running backs, and I know we've been excited about the RB2 value, and watching these drafts and the mocks and what we were doing and how people are starting to draft now is these things are going to pick up. We hit August 1st. There's a Hall of Fame game. People are going to start putting their leagues together. They're going to start drafting. All this stuff is going to change. And I was looking, I'm going, are we going to have to change our RB2 strategy? Is the RB2 value going away? This is a serious conversation we have to have right now, because we've been sitting and waiting on James Conner, on Raheem Mostert, And I think this stuff is going to change. And when we look at it, I'm going to go 6 through 10 right now and name some players for you as we get into this conversation. So right now in the 6th round, the majority of running backs that are going, it's Ramondre Stevenson, New England, Aaron Jones, now in Minnesota. We got David Montgomery, the number 2 for the Lions, DeAndre Swift, and that new look Bears offense. In the 7th round, Zamir White, James Conner. We knew his stock was going to continue to go up as we got closer and closer to the season. The 8th round, Jaylen Warren, number 2 in Pittsburgh, who everyone's still trying to make a number 1. Jonathan Brooks, the rookie for the Carolina Panthers, who's the first running back drafted this past draft. Then it's Najee Harris in that Steelers backfield. Zach Moss, Brian Robinson Jr. of the Commanders. 9th round, it's Raheem Mostert. And then it's the Titans backfield, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears. In the 10th round, we're seeing Javonte Williams, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, Devin Singletary, and Zeke. When you guys hear all those names, I'm going to give you my take. It's that between really the 6th and 8th round, going into drafts, I want to feel like I have my 3 running backs figured out. I would kind of change on waiting to maybe the 9th and 10th round. I'm looking at it as I'm going to get my elite wide receivers, locking my tight end, and I want to have my running backs figured out by the time I get to the end of the draft. When you're seeing some of this movement, how are you guys feeling about it?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same now that, I mean, you just kind of rattled off a bunch of names, which
I know.
a lot of those were 3-4 rounds later, just 2 weeks ago, right? So they're going to keep moving up, which does mean that wide receivers we like are going to fall. So wide receiver value could change. We could see it kind of flip on its head. I mean, there's still running backs I like in that range, but not nearly as many. And you know, all it takes is, hey, I only like 2 running backs, and they both get taken right in front of you, and you're left out in the cold.
Then you're Aaron.
Yeah. So yeah, it's but we kind of knew that was going to happen. We had been talking about like, hey, we're going to start to see that swing, and here it is.
Yeah, it's difficult. There are, like you said, there's running backs that I like there, but it's starting to get a little thin.
Yeah, you said like 12 names. I think I liked 3.
Yeah. It's definitely my mindset was changing, preparing for this episode and just going through it. And I'm feeling like, things are going to change. And we know we're going to be attacking the waiver wire, but I don't want to be thinking about the waiver wire in week 1. I want to say, all right, this is my team, and then I'll adjust from there. And so 6th through 9th round, like I want to make sure I got 3 running backs that I'm locked in with, and then I can have that movement, attack whoever I need to do on the waiver wire. Because looking at it, of course, James Conner, I think, has become a show favorite of ours. And, that might be someone you even draft in the 6th round. I think Aaron Jones, I'd be comfortable there. David Montgomery, man, above some of these other guys, like I think he's a good player, but, I think Jahmyr Gibbs eats into that. So I'm looking and I want to solidify my RB2 and 3 for sure. But here's some notes I want to throw out to you on these guys, especially because I think my favorite RB3 target might be the running back for the Chargers. And I want to throw this quote at you from Austin Eckler, who, of course, the name is now in the backfield of the Commanders. So he said in an interview a couple weeks ago that one of the reasons he moved on from the Chargers, too, was they wanted a workhorse, which something he's not at this point in his career. So they wanted a guy that can carry the ball 300 times per year, and he can't do that. He hasn't had the capacity to do that, and that's not his games. So the Chargers, maybe they don't have that 300 carry back on the roster. They got Gus Edwards, they got J.K. Dobbins, but knowing what Harbaugh does, and he wants to run the football, whether we go back to his time in San Francisco, working with Colin Kaepernick as a running quarterback in that offense, winning a national title at Michigan last year with Blake Corum at the focal point. Of the guys that you can wait and get in double-digit rounds, I'm still big on Gus Edwards just because they're going to run the football. They drafted a left tackle in the 1st round, Joe Alt, as Jim Harbaugh said that the offensive line is an attacking presence of an offense. When you look at kind of the RB3 guys. Gus Edwards is my favorite on the back end. But how do you guys feel about that?
I like the Gus Edwards take. I was like, he's solid, but he's solid when healthy. I was like, he's had a few injuries. That is one thing that worries me with Gus Edwards. And then, of course, J.K. Dobbins is coming off an injury too. So, it's pretty much Gus's room for the time being, in my opinion. So that one, I do like that. And I've liked Gus Edwards because he's like a Derrick Henry light. It's kind of putting he just runs the ball into the end zone. That's how he scores his points.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, Gus Edwards makes sense. We know that Harbaugh's going to want to run, and J.K. Dobbins, I still don't think is going to be. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen a running back come off Achilles and just be great. Like Breece Hall looked pretty amazing, but he's kind of the
he's young.
unique Yeah, he's unique. He's not. J.K. Dobbins just had two Achilles injuries in a row, back-to-back seasons. Now, granted, different Achilles, but it still happened. So I don't know.
You need both legs to run.
Right. So I just don't know. I don't know if you can trust him. So Gus Edwards is, I think, a great find. I'm also kind of a big fan of Singletary, for the Giants, just because somebody's got to run the ball. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think Singletary with the Giants, Zach Moss in Cincinnati, it's opportunity.
Yeah.
It's potential to start as the RB1 in an offense.
Even with Zach Moss, I don't know if I read this right, but it sounded like Chase Brown was taking more first team snaps. So it's like he may be falling, because I was high on Zach Moss. I liked Zach Moss, but that one's going to be an interesting one to see.
What about even Samir White
goes on.
in that vein of just getting a crack? If we're talking about at that point in time, just filling your RB2, RB3, just making sure you get guys with opportunities. That one we have to look at.
Yeah, that's completely valid. I was like, he's there.
How do you feel about, say, like a Zamir White, who right now he's penciled in as the RB1, because the Raiders didn't do much there in the backfield. So a Zamir White, a Singletary, you bring up Chase Brown versus Zach Moss, but then I look at Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, in that backfield where hasn't it been like the last 2 years everyone's just pointed out like, oh, yards per carry, Jalen Warren needs the ball more, and that really hasn't gone anywhere, and it's still kind of Najee Harris out there, trudging along, falling forward 3 yards. Those backfields versus guys that seem to have a shot by themselves, is that something that might tip it when you're trying to make that selection in the 7th, 8th, 9th round?
For me, it always does, because it's like, you have the guy that has the, like we said before, the clear path. There's nobody standing in front. To me, usually that's how I go. But if you want to go something that's semi-proven, like Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, it's okay. But someone that could take the ball, just to themselves, kind of like Rachaad White was kind of the only guy there. There's some noise like, oh, the rookie's going to step in and take some time, and it really didn't happen. It's just been him. So it's like it's a similar situation like that, and it is something good to find.
Yeah, and I think that the White is a good one, because is that Singletary, is that White the guy that just is there and ends up taking over and having a really good season that we're not expecting just because we're not talking about it. And that is why a backfield that we've kind of been interested in and excited because of all the changes to the Titans offense, I think I might be staying away from it now, especially after this quote from their new head coach. And the backfield we're talking about in Tennessee, of course, Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard, who are both going in the 9th round. So it's just flipping a coin. It's like, who do you get to pick first when you're in the 9th round of your draft, is the way it's been going. But you look at Brian Callahan, comes in, first year coach, was in Cincinnati. He said, quote, "The fun part for me is how are we going to deploy these guys? Maybe they both play at the same time. Maybe one gets hot and you let him run. Maybe we just rotate back and forth. I don't know what it's going to look like yet, but both are going to play quite a bit of football for us. And initially, I thought this could be like, all right, you just guess right in the 9th round and you get an RB1. I'm kind of at the point where I just want to let someone else guess right. Like, to me, that is a coach that is going to be like, you get 10 carries, you get 10 carries. Have at it. How do you guys feel about that backfield when you hear what the head coach had to say?
It's kind of worst case fantasy news in my opinion, because it's like, you're drafting a player hoping that he turns into the man, and he could be for one game and then he might fumble or he's inefficient with his carries, and then he doesn't do anything for a couple games because they're right in the hot hand. So it's like when you say that, it kind of worries me, based off of how the quote is. So
I still think I'm willing to take one or both of them if I'm looking to fill like a running back 4 spot. Right. So, okay, maybe not my running back 3 and definitely not my running back 2 anymore, which is what we were talking about before. But
like depth to depth. Like you're
yeah,
going RB heavy in the first 10 rounds.
Right. Yeah. If I'm looking, and I might even do it if I have 2 stud running backs, right? Like if the draft somehow fell where we've got 2 of the people we really like, let's just say you took like a Saquon Barkley and Etienne or a Devon Achane, I might take one of those 2 because I feel like I'm set at running back, and I'll just take a flyer on somebody who could be good.
you could plug in.
Right. I'm more likely to take a Chase Brown or something, but I also like the potential of just getting a floor points. Like I think that's where I start to be a little more okay with like Najee Harris's and Jalen Warren's and Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard's, is if I have 2 stud running backs. Because then I'm just looking for plug and plays on bye weeks. And those guys, I feel like, they don't have high ceilings, but they have pretty low. They have higher floors than a Chase Brown or a Zach Moss or, any one of those guys. So I think that's kind of my perspective on those players.
Yeah, I think it got interesting. And I kind of felt like the need to make sure your RB2 is locked in. It's when you get to draft day, it's going to be higher than you expected. Like if you're planning on waiting at running backs, we were looking at some of the value, and you were right on, Steve, when you hit on this early in the summer when we were talking. It's like, this is going to change. We love wide receivers. All those guys were getting the giant contract extensions. It's PPR now for the majority of fantasy football leagues. But you said like the running backs are going to come back around. People are going to see their value. And I think we're seeing that start to play out with the RB2s, where really 6 through 9, you need to lock in your RB2 for sure. Maybe even get one depth guy.
Well, the other thing we're seeing though is quarterbacks are starting to kind of come up too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which that's actually good for us just as much. So I think really what we're going to see from our perspective is we're going to get quarterbacks we love, because we've talked about, we are great with quarterback 8 through 12. But we're going to start to see wide receivers that we're having to draft 5th, 6th round start to fall 7th, 8th, 9th round, and we're going to be a lot happier, right? So there's a pro and a con. Yeah, we're losing out on running back value, which means we have to change our draft a little bit. But we're going to get wide receivers that we were drafting as wide receiver 3s as wide receiver, get those same wide receivers, but way later.
Yeah, there's give and takes all this. Like if there's a trend,
you got to ride the waves.
Something else is coming back, or you're going to get the benefit of it. And one of the things that I keep going back to this offseason is the Buffalo Bills. I've talked about Keon Coleman, their rookie wide receiver, Dalton Kincaid. If you don't know, I'm going to draft him. Like I'll spend a 4th round pick on him at this point. He's my favorite pass catcher.
I'll draft him first.
As tight end 5, I do think that he's going to be in the battle to be a top 3 tight end this season. But I think what we're seeing is just how good Josh Allen is, because people are starting to notice that there's value in Buffalo. And I think that there could be league-winning value with the Buffalo Bills. Not just, Kincaid, getting him locked in after you're probably able to get 2 good wide receivers and an RB1. And James Cook, if his touchdown numbers go up, he's a guy that is going right now in the 4th round. And so maybe even go 4-5. Cook, Kincaid, falling in love with the Buffalo Bills. We know Josh Allen is going to go high, but I am more and more on this guy. I think we had this conversation at the draft potentially. In regards to the Buffalo Bills and what they're doing, is Curtis Samuel a wide receiver 3/flex could be a gigantic difference maker for your team. And I'm going to tell you why. So Joe Brady, Bills offense coordinator, was the OC of the Carolina Panthers in 2020. And that was the season Curtis Samuel accounted for over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. He caught 77 passes, 851 yards, 3 touchdowns, also ran the ball 41 times, 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Joe Brady knows how to use Curtis Samuel, likes his value. And that wasn't all that long ago. All of a sudden, Curtis Samuel is still not a good athlete. So he has pass catching ability. I look at that offense, and I know Josh Allen is going to run. James Cook is there. But I could see, Samuel getting looks because there's not a true RB2. I think Curtis Samuel is someone that you're going to see people maybe even taking the 10th round of drafts and go, oh, what are you doing? I think this dude is a fantastic targeting offense that people are going to be talking about. Keon Coleman, Kincaid, Cook. But Joe Brady knows Samuel. Samuel's been productive. There's opportunities to be productive in that offense. I think he's the best value of all those guys. And I'm interested just to see what you guys think, kind of trying to put those together. And am I reaching too much in this, or is this someone that should be on your list lane drafts?
This is another Kadarius Toney take. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I actually love it. Curtis Samuel's the veteran pass catching on that team. He said with Joe Brady, it's like they're gonna get him the ball. I actually like Curtis Samuel a lot over Coleman. Coleman has a good upside, but Curtis Samuel, I think's solid where he's gonna get drafted. I definitely love that. So
I would even like to take both if I could, because Coleman, maybe the long-term upside, especially in a keeper league, not just a dynasty league. But the thing is, Coleman, you're right now investing a 9th round pick in him. Yeah. So these guys, if you take them, you're probably gonna have to take them back to back because the ADP is 994 for Coleman, 109 for Samuel. But it's kind of playing both sides of the upside of a Bills offense, potentially developing a wide receiver 1 for the long term, versus the now in Curtis Samuel. And how do you feel about it, Steve?
I actually have no interest in Samuel. So okay. I think Keon Coleman is the guy. Like all the reports coming out, Keon Coleman is making great strides with Josh Allen, and Josh Allen has proved he just wants to feed a target. Otherwise, they're not going to be fantasy relevant. Like Kincaid last season was the only fantasy relevant while Stephon Diggs sat on the bench and did nothing. It was Josh Allen and pretty much Kincaid. They were the only ones that you were, and Cooks, that you were comfortable starting. Coleman, I think, could fill that role, but I don't think Samuel is that guy. Now, I'm more than willing to listen to that argument where you go, hey, I take both of them because somebody has to pop here. Mm-hmm. But at this point, that I would rather take a 9th round pick on Keon Coleman than a 10th round pick on Samuel. If Samuel was going 12, I'd probably take it. Otherwise, I'd be fine taking Coleman and Shakir.
Do you think the slot guy in Shakir, given the fact he has production with Josh Allen, is better? So you're just out on Samuel as a player overall?
I'm just out on where his value is. I don't necessarily. I might be out on Samuel.
Well, I think what's interesting. So do you think that? And I know this is one of the things you talk about is the target tree and sustainability. Mm-hmm. And so if Keon Coleman's that dude, well then it's Kincaid and Coleman, right? Yeah. That'll take it over. But do you think Allen, with what you've watched and what we've seen out of Josh Allen, is he a guy that is not going to spread the football around, I guess? Like you said, he just kind of has.
He does. He gets tunnel vision and he just throws. Allen had 15 rushing touchdowns last season, right? Like he had 43 touchdowns total, so 28 passing touchdowns, 15 rushing. That dude, his touchdown numbers look amazing, but when you really think about it, he wasn't spreading the ball around to a bunch of different receivers. If he couldn't find his guy, he just ran. And you know what? If I was him and I was that athletic, I'd probably do it too. But
Right.
it's gonna. I think we've talked about it all the time. It's Kincaid is a tight end, so I'm more than willing to listen to your argument on taking him in 5th round because he's a tight end and the value there. There's just not as many to draft from. But I think Coleman is the wide receiver 1. He's their first overall draft pick. Yeah, he was a 2nd round pick, but he was their first pick. I'd rather have Coleman. Samuel, you're taking based off of what he did in Joe Brady's offense for the Panthers. He's gone through other teams since then. You know what I mean?
Okay. He's hasn't played with Josh Allen or an offense like that since then.
Yeah, but
That was fair.
But if I'm going to do anything and I'm just drafting and I'm trying to get a value target, I'm going to take Shakir, who killed it in the playoffs with Josh Allen. So I don't know who's going to get all the targets. Yeah, I don't know who's going to get all the targets. I don't think it's Samuel. So
I think the one thing that I would be fine there is in the 10th round, we're not drafting starters, right? So this is the conversation we're having. So would you rather take the upside of Coleman in the 9th round long term? Yes. But in the 10th round, I like the potential of them manufacturing him touches. And that's where I think that some more of the value could come from. Because
and that's
part of what Joe Brady's mindset is that Josh Allen's going to be Josh Allen, right? But maybe in week 4 or week 6, you would rather give Curtis Samuel 4 carries and see if Josh Allen runs 2 times less. But this is the nitpicking debates we're having in late round.
Right. But so if I'm in the 10th round and I'm just looking at wide receivers real quick in the 10th round, Jameson Williams and Cortland Sutton, I would much rather take than. I know it sounds weird.
No, I think Sutton. That's enough.
Denver's passing. Yeah, with that we could go in a long conversation about.
Because with Cortland Sutton last year, it was 50-50 balls from Russell Wilson.
Yes.
And now we're in an offense where Jarrett Stidham's going to start for 6 weeks and then Bo Nix is going to take over.
It's
so
scary.
The other players in that same range, and this is probably why I'm just out on Samuel, is Brock Purdy, Nick Chubb, Tajay Spears, Jameson Williams, Austin Eckler, Cortland Sutton, Jaden Daniels, Devin Singletary. Right? It's all players that I'm more interested in. So I'm not going to get a lot of Samuel shares because there's a lot of players in that same range that I like a lot more.
Yeah.
And Samuel's just not going to, I'm just not going to end up on
if you're going to sit on someone
the
like
piece of the offense.
Yeah, but if I'm going to take upside, I'm going to take running back upside or wide receivers
Nick
that
Chubb, Singletary.
Nick Chubb, yeah, or
Brock Purdy upside.
I think, dude,
Blake
this
Corum.
is a tangent. I think Williamson, dude, I feel the same way about him as you do Curtis Samuel.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that ship is sailed.
See that, and so that's kind of where we're like, hey,
he's killer in Madden.
Yeah.
I have no problem sitting on Jameson Williams because I like that offense. And so it's the same argument you're making. Like,
yep.
I'm just sitting on a player.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather sit on the young guy who's fast than the older guy who at one point was good.
Yeah, he has more guys to overcome though in the target tree.
Oh, for sure. But I'm taking him with the hopes that he does that one catch for 75 yards and a touchdown.
It's possible.
That is
possible.
That is a heck of a thing to just sit there and put in your starting lineup.
Well, I'm never putting that in the starting lineup.
Well, then you're never getting that one catch for 75 yards and a touchdown.
That's a good point. But you never know.
You trade him once he pops off.
Yeah, he has 2 good games and you get rid of him.
And then you get him off your bench.
Yeah, but like I said, in that range, I'm more interested in the running back.
That's fair. I think a lot of it comes down to how your team is at that point too.
Yeah.
Or how the
what
board
you went with early. So yes, this is
the tough combos. Yeah.
But I think that's what I like is we have different views and strategies, and that's kind of what I wanted to get out of this. Is I actually think there's a lot of value there for the Bills. We just have 2 different guys we like.
Yeah, exactly.
Samuel, and I think it's redraft versus keeper. Like if it's
absolutely.
You're going Coleman all day, every day. But I think that at least early on, I think Samuel can have some potential flex value for you in a league, especially early in the season. Because I think it's going to be hard to sit here, and I love the talent, but go Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman are all just going to hit the ground running.
Right.
So I think early it might be Samuel, and then I could absolutely see Coleman, taking
Making
over,
that run.
kind of
Mhm.
like Kincaid did, the second half of the season. So
That's fair.
so that's why I might actually be comfortable drafting both in that scenario. Or maybe I'll flex Samuel for a little bit, see how it plays out depending on how my team is, and knowing that, all right, Coleman's going to become a thing at some point. With what you just said, he's going to be their number one wide receiver. He was the first pick for that team. Could have easily been a first round wide receiver.
Yeah.
So I like that. All right. With that being said, let's move on to our last fantasy spin before we head to blind resumes. Back in tight ends. Tight ends 6 through 10. Who should you be betting on? All right. These are the names, guys, that are going right now. 6 through 10. We got George Kittle going tight end 6, about 60th overall. Kyle Pitts is right there. Tight end 7, 59, 60 overall. Evan Ingram, 8th round. Tight end 8, 63rd overall. So in that mix, we got Jake Ferguson, tight end 9, 84th overall. David Njoku, tight end 10, 86th overall. And I really wanted to get your thoughts on these three guys, Kittle, Kyle Pitts, and Evan Ingram. On our X account, you can follow us there on X. Throw that up there real quick for you. Boom. At 3DudesFFS. The fantasy footballers put out a take of, it was start, trade, and cut. With these three guys, kind of the tipping point of the mid-range of tight ends. And for me, I'm starting Evan Ingram. I would trade George Kittle, and I would cut Kyle Pitts. And, Kyle Pitts is a player that people are right back on because of the quarterback. Kirk Cousins coming in, taking over for the Falcons. We saw him as a rookie in 2021 have 1,000 receiving yards, but he had 1,026 receiving yards as a rookie. And in 27 games since then, he's had 1,023 yards. So we know it's been injuries. He's battling the knee. I can't see Kyle Pitts living up to that value, man. He's a guy that if he goes off, I'll let someone else take him. And I love Evan Ingram. And by the way, we touched on Evan Ingram a little bit more. This is what Evan Ingram had to say ahead of training camp. He said, quote, "My role last year was underneath, being a security blanket for Trevor, which is why the catches were phenomenal." He said, just getting the ball in his hands fast and getting upfield and moving the chains. He said, quote, "I've done that really well. And I think the next level for me is to improve on that intermediate and deep range passing game, which actually could open up because, there's been a lot of turnover for the Jaguars. When you look at the back end, tight ends 6 through 10, maybe it's Jake Ferguson, maybe it's David Njoku. Who are you guys targeting? Who are you guys going to bet on if you kind of end up waiting on tight end in your drafts?
Aaron, I'll let you take the floor because Evan Ingram's your dude.
Yeah, for me, the easiest one to live with as your starter there would be Evan Ingram because he's a consistent floor. He's pretty solid. Everyone else, it's like Kittle. It's like, he has his ups and downs. Pitts, I'm not really into. The other one I do like is Ferguson, and surprisingly, Njoku's pretty far down there. David Njoku would be one. You have Bowers listed, and then Goddard's another one. But I definitely would go Ingram and probably, honestly, Ferguson. If I had the choice between those two, it would be one or the other, whoever's there. And I think you even had a comment about Kyle Pitts, JJ. It says he's learning basically two different positions. It says there's some tight end and there's some receiver. So he's got a lot on his plate. He's handled it really well. I'm just excited to see him continue to get more comfortable in the system. But what it kind of sounds like to me is, he's not skilled. It's like he's doing a lot. There's too many aspects for that. So I'm definitely out on Pitts. So it would be Ingram, and I'm curious what Steve has.
So I actually agree with both of you. Evan Ingram is, for me, the easiest play. I will say this though. So George Kittle, before when Ayuk was talked about being traded, was ahead of Ingram on my list. And the reason that is when one of those two guys is out, Samuel or Ayuk, Kittle becomes the next receiving target, and he gets a ton of catches. I still think for me it's Evan Ingram than George Kittle, but I have no problem if you say George Kittle's ahead because you think Debo's going to get hurt or Ayuk's not going to play with him. I really like Kittle a lot, and I still struggle with putting him behind Evan Ingram, but Evan Ingram just has been consistent. After that, I'm completely out on Kyle Pitts. He's not in my top 10. I'm not drafting him. I actually have Brock Bowers up higher. I think he can be the number 2 in I almost said Oakland, Las Vegas. I think he can be number 2 in Las Vegas in targets and receptions behind Devontae. So for me, Brock Bowers I know he's not a part of the list, but
Michael Gallup retired, so
yeah, I mean Gallup's out, and so you just have Adams and Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer is there, so maybe you see some more tight end 2 sets. But I think Bowers is absolutely interesting. Of this group, and what's interesting when you look at why there's so much conversation between Kittle, Pitts, and Ingram is they're all pretty much going within 3 or 4 picks. And so those guys are bunched up together. I'm taking Ingram over those guys. I'm there with you. But I would even be willing to wait because I see Jake Ferguson sitting there. So if somehow the draft plays out and I don't get Dalton Kincaid, I could wait on that. And I would be very happy taking Jake Ferguson 8th or 9th round. Right now, he's 84th overall. So right there at the top of the 8th round. Because you're looking at a guy that was the Cowboys' number 2 wide receiver last year. 71 catches on 102 targets, 761 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Nothing has changed for the Cowboys. Like, it's still going to be CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson. So instead of maybe chasing points with Pitts or Kittle, Ferguson, to me, I would have him ahead of even someone like Kyle Pitts right now.
Agreed. And if you miss out on I still think Evan Ingram and George Kittle are ahead of Ferguson, but if I still want to take him at the right value, right? So Kincaid goes in the 5th and maybe a tight end run happens, which is kind of what we're seeing with those back-to-back. I would be okay waiting until the 8th round and going, okay, well, then I'll just take Jake Ferguson here and be happy. Like, I would love to get a Kincaid, an Ingram, a Kittle, but I feel like the 3 of us are going to be fighting for the same 3 players there. So whoever's drafting first, Kincaid, there goes Ingram. Okay, I guess I'm out on these players. So yeah, I'm okay with waiting on that. And I'm also, like I said, I am also okay with taking Brock Bowers as, player 100. Yeah, just because I think he could very well end up with the second most targets on that team.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting plays there because the tight end depth, it's definitely better than it has been. Because if we look at what we're going to see, the top 5, it's Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, and then you're sitting there and you're having a conversation about a George Kittle and Evan Ingram and Jake Ferguson. Like, there's a lot more depth at tight end as what we're going to see, because people aren't going to be jumping on Travis Kelce in the 1st round. And so people will be waiting on him a little bit. It's going to be the Laporta one is going to be interesting to see when he goes. But I think you're going to get probably some of the best value at the tight end position that we've had in fantasy football for a long time, where you might not have to chase one of those guys at the top end.
Yeah, definitely. And you even look at Njoku's stats from last year. It's like he had 123 targets, 81 receptions, 882 yards, 6 touchdowns.
But Joe Flacco won't be there.
Yeah, I know. Flacco won't be there.
Well,
but
you have the giant question mark. What are you going to get out of Deshaun Watson?
Yeah. Flacco made Njoku look amazing. Like, that's where I felt like that's where he got hot, is when Flacco started. But he didn't do the same thing with Watson.
Yeah, Watson definitely wants to throw down the field.
Yeah.
And then the names we haven't even talked about yet, too. I'm just thinking, Mark Andrews was hurt last season. If he's on the field, Lamar Jackson is still going to feed Mark Andrews. You look at Dallas Goedert. He's kind of down in the passing tree now, especially with Saquon Barkley in there. But, he's someone that's going to be flirting with tight end 10. Dalton Schultz, but then all of a sudden that's a passing game that you're like, well, you have Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell.
Everyone's there.
He moves down. But I think in terms of 10-team leagues, finding your starting tight end, like there's a solid group of 10 that you're going to feel good about. Now, the value is different. If you're in a bigger league, you want to go get one of these guys earlier.
Sure.
We understand that because there's still a gap between the tight ends and all the other positions, because usually teams are only playing one pass catching tight end all the time and not a lot of 11 personnel unless, it's just the blocking tight end on the field. So as we get to the end of our episode, it is time. Blind resume time.
Blind
Steve
resume.
wants to throw some stuff out there. So we're going to start with quarterbacks, and we'll just throw it up there. So we got A, B, and C. So let us know what this is all about and what you're going to be doing.
So what we're doing here, I'm going to read you guys. You can see quarterback 8, 74th overall, 21 points per game. I'm going to read you their stats from last season, and I'm going to tell you where they're being drafted, and then I want you to tell me higher or lower, if they should go higher or lower, or do you think they're right on? And then I'll give you their names. So quarterback 1, or A, last season had 4,516 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and ran for 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's currently going as quarterback 8, 74th overall. And you can see his points per game, 21. Quarterback B is, I almost said his name, 4,280 passing yards, 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, had 144 rushing yards and 2 interceptions, or 2 rushing touchdowns. And then quarterback C, and you can see this one, quarterback C is going as quarterback 3, 35th overall, 4,183 yards, 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and had 339 rushing yards. So he had the most rushing yards out of everyone. He also had the most rushes. He had 75 rushes compared to the next player on this list was 55. So all I want you to do, I'll tell you the quarterbacks in a second, but are they going at the right spot, the wrong spot? So should they go higher, lower, or are they good? So let's start with quarterback A. He's 8th overall, 74th.
Well, if I'm seeing a quarterback that's 21 points per game,
Yep.
74th overall, that feels like pretty good value. Going as QB 8, I would feel like maybe if you're at 21 points per game, you should probably even be closer to QB 5, top 5 at that point in time. B, to me, is the best value of the bunch. So you're still getting 17.5 points per game. QB 11, 100th overall, so 10th, 11th round. Or I like to wait and draft quarterbacks. And then I see 18 points per game for 35th overall. No, thank you. Like, of these 3, like, I'm targeting B.
Okay,
C's
Aaron?
Lamar, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
So I think so.
I'm just curious.
If I'm hearing correct, quarterback A is probably good value. You might go up a little bit higher, but you're okay with it. Quarterback B should maybe be drafted a little bit higher. Quarterback C should definitely go later.
Yeah, so A, higher, B, like, I'd love that value. So yes, I could be so A higher, B
really
higher,
curious.
B lower.
Okay, so quarterback A is Dak Prescott, which we've talked about. We love on this show. Quarterback B is Brock Purdy. Again, quarterback we love. Quarterback C is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it's a name.
Okay, it's the name. So I'm not saying Patrick Mahomes shouldn't be the 3rd quarterback drafted, but I don't know if he should be the 35th overall pick, especially when you can see those 2 players, and Brock Purdy especially, who only averaged half a point less than him a game. And I can get him 65 picks later. All right, running backs next.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, so as you can see, running back A, he averaged 21.5 points per game. Running back A had 1,144 yards, 12 touchdowns, 32 catches, 206 yards, and 3 touchdowns in the air. Okay, running back B had 634 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, had 75 catches, 466 yards receiving, and a touchdown. And then running back C, 962 yards, 6 touchdowns on the ground, 41 catches, 280 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Now, important with this is the reason I picked these 3 running backs, all of them missed time. So
Okay.
all of these running backs missed between 3 and 5 games. Okay. So running back A is running back 7 overall, 18th overall player, did miss 5 games on the season, averaged 21.5 points per game. Running back B did miss 4 games on the season. Again, 18 points per game, 49th overall, running back 16. And then running back C missed 3 games, 16 points per game, 14th overall. So go ahead, rank them again, higher, lower, or good value.
I could say A being higher,
Okay.
B being higher, and C being lower. And I don't know if this is the way you wrote it up, but I love B again. Like that would be my target. all
Yeah, I know, right?
Okay, so this one surprised me. So running back A is Kyron Williams.
Yeah.
Okay. He did miss 5 games, but he averaged 21.5 points per game. Running back B is Alvin Kamara.
Oh,
Okay. And then running back C is Saquon Barkley. Now, again, we think he's going to do better because of the Eagles, but I did want to point him out just because he's going ahead of Kyron Williams, but a significant difference in points per game, which is why when we talked earlier, Kyron Williams moved up my list so much.
Well,
I think
Okay.
Alvin Kamara
I knew that first one was Kyron, but
is
Yeah.
Kamara. Yeah, go ahead.
Kamara's really interesting because I think he's a name brand player in fantasy football.
Mhm.
And I also wonder just with last season and running backs, like is he being overlooked in this? And obviously my answer is yes. Like because if you're waiting in a 4th round back, and we had I think some great discussions about 2nd round running backs, 3rd round. I mean, Alvin Kamara in the 4th round, and I don't think his production is going to be all that different in an offense. Sign me up.
I mean, he only had 180 carries last season, but he had 75 catches.
Yeah,
Like-
Derek Carr is going to get him that football all day, every day.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Okay, last one. Now, this one is kind of everybody's going to figure it out, but there is a player in here that I kind of want to see. I want to see what everybody says. So I guess I did write this up this way, JJ, because I bet you picked B again. But wide receiver A. So I'm going to give you the games they played just because I picked the same points on this one. So they're all scored around the same amount of points, but there is a difference, which is why points per game is in here. Wide receiver A played in 14 games. So he did miss 3 games. Had 72 catches and 1,014 yards and 4 touchdowns. There's no real rushing we're going to worry about here. So we'll just kind of go over it. So you can see on the list, wide receiver A is going as wide receiver 19, 33 overall, average 14 points per game. Wide receiver B, wide receiver 27, 53 overall, 12 points per game, had 63 catches, 1,140 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And then wide receiver C is wide receiver 8, 11th overall, 12 points per game, had 95 catches, 1,042 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, the biggest difference between all these receivers is wide receiver C had 160 targets, wide receiver B had 106, and wide receiver A had 104. But they all finished within 10 points or 15 points of each other. Okay, go for it. Too high, too low, or good?
B, so wide receiver 27, 53rd overall, 12 points per game. That's interesting to me with the numbers that you said and then the target share. Maybe I actually could see that one being a little bit lower. I think C, when you look at 11th overall, only 12 points per game, that's got to be a name brand guy. So that's probably why he's going 11th overall, being wide receiver 8 right now. So you mentioned missing some time, so there's high upside there. So I think I'd probably be fine with that because you're expecting
wide receiver A missed time. Wide receiver C did not miss any games.
Oh, C did not miss any time.
I was thinking.
I'd go lower than just 12 points per game. And A, I'm feeling good. I like that value. So say B lower. C, I have to go lower then.
Yeah, C is definitely
A,
lower.
I like it.
So wide receiver A is Jalen Waddle. Wide receiver B is George Pickens. and wide receiver C is Garrett Wilson.
Oh, that makes sense. Saying the targets, I was like,
The reason this one was important to me, and the reason I wanted to bring this one up is I went through the last 2 seasons. What we've seen is Garrett Wilson has insane targets, right? 150 and 160 in his last 2 seasons. Is this his 3rd season? But he's not average this. He's not scored more than 219 points per game or 219 total points in a PPR setting in these 2 seasons that he's played.
but Rodgers.
But Rodgers, right? But you can say wide receiver B, George Pickens, who's being drafted 53rd overall, has the same kind of upside. He's going into his 3rd year, and he just got a new quarterback that's not Kenny Pickett. So he did this with backup quarterbacks, just like Garrett Wilson did. And then the reason I threw in Jalen Waddle, he's my man crush. He averaged 14 points per game and was hurt and is going a little bit later. So I just wanted to bring these players up because some of them I think we're drafting based on name brand and we're missing value. And you can see in this case, wide receiver B and wide receiver C have the same points per game, and there's a huge difference in where they're going.
Pickens is kind of on my radar. He's going a little bit higher than you'd want, but he's definitely there because he's got 2 quarterbacks. This time.
Well, Pickens, 5th, 6th round, I'd be intrigued because Russell Wilson and Cortland Sutton. Like it'd be Russell Wilson, Pickens, kind of that thing there. So that would be intriguing. I think Waddle, if you can get him into the 2nd, 3rd round, I think you're feeling really good because I think that when you look at
33rd in a 10-team league is 4th round.
Yeah. So.
Which I've been saying he's a 3rd round pick. So,
yeah,
you have
2nd round pick. So
so that's top of the. You're right. That's top of the 4th round.
What did I draft him in?
Home run.
6th or 7th.
Yeah. So the 33rd that's a home run.
Oh yeah.
At that point in time, I like that a lot.
So
get you thinking about value.
I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because today we're talking about running backs in 2nd round. Garrett Wilson is that into the 2nd round, which is a lot of the other players we were talking about we like there. And that might be where you kind of make that switch. Hey, I'm picking end of the 1st. Maybe instead of taking Garrett Wilson, I take, Jahmyr Gibbs or whoever your running back is.
Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley.
Kyron Williams. Yeah, you take one of those guys and then you go, okay, I'll just get value with those other wide receivers later.
That's like blind. Now you have to do this every episode. Come with something.
Okay,
we can do some more into the season, of course.
Yeah, we can do some more blind resumes. It blew my mind when I was doing that research on it. I was like, what?
I love that.
George Pickens especially I was thrown off.
Because I think one of the themes, if this is your first episode watching us, thank you. If you've watched other episodes, we're big right now on getting the most value we can out of these picks. That's why we kind of focused on specific rounds today with the running backs and then the late round value. Because I think it's easy to get caught up on rankings and you look at your top 10 quarterback rankings, top 10 running back rankings. No, you need to more think about where you're getting these players because that is what your team is going to look like and the rounds in which you're drafting and where you're drafting. Of course, it's going to look different and that's how you're going to build your team. So value is big in our discussions and that blind resume pointed that out. So don't forget, like and subscribe. We'd much appreciate it. You can follow us on the X at 3DudesFFS. If you are into the gram, on the Instagram at 3DudesFantasyFootball. Look at those underscores. Just type it into the search bar. We'd much appreciate it. And we're going to continue these conversations. We got the fantasy spin. We did a mock draft 1.0. You can look back at that because that stuff changes all kinds. We'll do a mock draft 2.0 coming up. It has been a lot of fun, and I can't wait because you know what happens August 1st, gentlemen?
Hall of Fame game.
Football.
Football is football. Let's get it. It is here.
Ooh.
So for Stephen Masterson, Aaron Hernandez, I'm JJ Buck. Everybody, Metal peace and love. Thank you for watching the 3 Dudes Fantasy Football Show.
Later, y'all.